Welcome back to our channel,
True crime enthusiasts!
Tonight, we plunge into a chilling story that lays bare the raw, unfiltered brutality of the death penalty. Imagine a 70-year-old man strapped to the execution gurney, knowing the exact minute the lethal drugs will stop his heart. Described by a psychiatrist as having a heart full of scorpions, Billie Wayne Coble faced his end with eerie calm. In his final days, he refused to apologize to the victims' families. But as the poison flowed, his son and grandson erupted, banging furiously on the death chamber glass, screaming obscenities, and getting dragged out and arrested right there in the witness room. This is no fiction. In August 1989, in rural Texas, Coble, devastated by his crumbling marriage, snapped. He shot and killed his estranged wife's parents, Robert and Zelda Vicha, and her brother, Bobby, a police sergeant. He then kidnapped his wife Karen at gunpoint and tied up their children, threatening to kill them too. After nearly 30 years on death row, Coble became the oldest person executed in modern Texas history on February 28, 2019. British journalist Susanna Reid sat with him in his final days for the gripping ITV series Death Row, Countdown to Execution. He spoke openly about his Vietnam War trauma, his loveless childhood, and his crimes, but showed no clear remorse. The victims' families waited decades for justice, while Coble's own family shattered in grief. This case exposes both sides of capital punishment, the horror of cold-blooded murder, the endless pain for survivors, and the agony of watching a father die, sparking violence even in the execution chamber. Join me for this disturbing case as we trace the bloody crime, the decades of appeals, and those haunting final moments. It's a gut-wrenching look at life, death, and whether justice heals or just creates more scars. In the quiet rural community of Coble, Texas, a small farming town northeast of Waco, 40-year-old Billie Wayne Coble seemed like an ordinary guy on the surface. A Vietnam War veteran with a troubled past, he had already been married twice before tying the knot with his third wife, Karen Vicha, in July 1988. They hadn't even been married a full year when Karen decided she wanted out, threatening divorce. To Coble, that was the breaking point. On the afternoon of August 29, 1989, rage consumed him. He first went to the home of Karen's parents, Robert and Zelda Vicha, and shot them both dead. Then he drove to the nearby house of Karen's brother, Bobby Vicha, a sergeant with the Waco Police Department, and killed him too, using a homemade silencer on his gun. All three were bound and executed at close range in a cold, calculated spree. Coble then returned to Karen's house, where he handcuffed her 3 young daughters and tied up her son, J.R., with duct tape and rope. As the terrified kids lay helpless, he bragged to them that their grandfather was dead and that he would soon be on America's Most Wanted. When Karen came home, Coble kidnapped her at knifepoint, forcing her into his truck. A high-speed police chase ensued through the Texas countryside. It ended when Coble crashed, injuring himself and Karen. He was arrested at the scene. Even in the hospital, strapped to a gurney with injuries, Coble was boastful, laughing and joking with officers, showing no remorse. The victim's family was plunged into unimaginable shock and grief, losing 3 loved ones in one brutal afternoon. Coble was quickly charged with capital murder. After a trial, he was convicted and sentenced to death, beginning what would become nearly 30 years on Texas death row. Trust me, the darkness is only beginning. His decades of appeals, the final countdown, and the chaos in the execution chamber, it's all even more chilling ahead. 8 days before his scheduled execution, British journalist Susanna Reid sat face to face with Billie Wayne Coble inside the Stark visiting room of the Polunsky unit in Livingston, Texas, the notorious home of Texas death row. At 70 years old, Coble appeared remarkably composed, his voice steady, almost philosophical, as he spoke through the glass partition. "There ain't no good way to die," he told Raid Matter of Factly when asked about lethal injection. "Death is death." He recounted watching over 400 fellow inmates walk their final steps to the Huntsville execution chamber during his 3 decades behind bars, desensitizing him to the inevitability of his own end. He accepted it without fear. Coble admitted to the murders. He had always done so, but direct remorse was elusive. "I feel bad about the circumstances that led up to it," he said, drawing chilling parallels to killing in Vietnam, where taking lives had become routine. Pressed on an apology to the victim's family, he refused, saying it to his ex-wife Karen. "Ain't saying it to them." He opened up about a loveless childhood, his mother institutionalized with mental illness when he was young, leaving him starved for affection. Yet, he showed no dread of the needle. In fact, he insisted his son be there to witness it, for the boy's own good, to teach him something profound about consequences. Raid described his cold, probing eyes as unforgettable, wondering aloud if evil exists or if ordinary men simply commit monstrous acts. "Believe me, the countdown tightens from here. The appeals denied, the victim's long wait for closure, and the explosive chaos in the death chamber itself. It's about to become even more raw and disturbing." On one side stood the Vicha family, forever scarred by the afternoon Billie Wayne Coble stole 3 lives. Decades later, the grandchildren who survived that day, then just kids, still carried the terror. One of the girls, now grown, remembered being bound with duct tape and rope while Coble gloated. She described the moment she learned of his execution in 2019, a wave of relief, almost like exhaling after holding her breath for 30 years. "It's finally over," she said. To them, Coble was pure evil, cold, remorseless, a man who slaughtered their grandparents and uncle without a flicker of mercy. They believed, without question, that he deserved the needle. On the other side was Coble's own family, fractured by the same violence. His son Gordon grew up visiting his father through prison glass, never knowing a normal childhood. Gordon's own son, Billie's grandson, had only ever hugged his grandfather with a pane of reinforced glass between them. Gordon never denied his father's guilt. He did a horrible thing, he admitted, yet he fiercely opposed the death penalty. "Nobody wins here," he told reporters. Execution wouldn't bring back the dead, it would only add another layer of pain. Coble's defense had long argued Vietnam War trauma. PTSD from brutal combat helped explain his unraveling. Old war buddies described a changed man after the jungle haunted, quick to anger. Appeals raised the issue repeatedly, but courts rejected it every time. As February 28, 2019 approached, tensions in Coble's family boiled over. Gordon wrestled with whether to witness the execution his father insisted he attend. Emotions ran raw, love tangled with horror, loyalty clashing with grief. 2 families, bound by one man's rage, heading toward a collision in the death chamber. Trust me, what happens next? The final hours, the witnesses on both sides, the outburst that shocked everyone, is even more intense and heartbreaking. Nestled in the piney woods of East Texas, the small town of Huntsville, population around 45,000, has earned a grim nickname, the execution capital of the world. Since resuming capital punishment in 1982, Texas has carried out 596 executions as of late 2025, all by lethal injection inside the red brick Huntsville unit, better known as the Walls unit. The death chamber there is a sterile, clinical room. A gurney with restraints, IV lines dangling, witnesses peering through glass on either side. The procedure is deceptively simple. Texas uses a single massive dose of pentobarbital, a powerful barbiturate that floods the veins, inducing deep unconsciousness before shutting down breathing and the heart. Death typically comes in 10 to 40 minutes, though some have lingered longer in silence. To many locals, executions are just part of life. The prison system is the town's largest employer. Thousands work as guards, administrators, or support staff. Most residents support the death penalty, viewing it as justice served, not spectacle. Protests are rare. The process has become routine, almost normalized. Yet the price tag tells a different story. A single death penalty case in Texas costs taxpayers an average of $2.3 million, roughly 3 times more than imprisoning someone for life in maximum security. Decades of appeals, specialized trials, and heightened security drive the expense sky high. As February 28, 2019 drew near for Billie Wayne Coble, his final appeals, including a last-ditch plea to the U.S. Supreme Court, were swiftly denied. No stay, no mercy. The clock ticked towards 6 p.m. What unfolds in those final hours, the witnesses gathered, and the explosive emotions that erupted? It's raw, chaotic, and unforgettable. The end is closer than ever. February 28, 2019 dawned cold and tense in Texas. That morning, Billie Wayne Coble's family, his son Gordon, grandson Dalton, and others, gathered for their last visit at the Texas Prison Museum's Hospitality House, a quiet facility near the Walls Unit where death row families say goodbye. Emotions ran high. They clung to faint hope that the U.S. Supreme Court might grant a stay based on claims of ineffective counsel and flawed testimony from his original trial. Meanwhile, guards transferred Coble the short distance from Pulaski Unit in Livingston to the Huntsville Unit's death house, where he would spend his final hours in a holding cell. Adjacent to the execution chamber, outside the red, brick walls unit, small crowds assembled as evening approached. A group of police officers gathered to honor victim Bobby Vicha, the slain sergeant. Anti-death penalty protesters held vigil with signs and candles, their numbers modest but resolute in the fading light. The victim's family, still raw after 3 decades, waited inside. One relative expressed a grim wish that Coble was suffering mentally in his final moments, just as their parents had in theirs. At precisely 5 p.m., word came. The Supreme Court had denied the final appeal. No stay. The death warrant activated at 6 p.m. sharp. As the clock ticked past, prison staff escorted the 70-year-old Vietnam veteran down the short hallway. Strapped to the gurney under harsh fluorescent lights, IV lines ready, witnesses on both sides peering through the glass. The end was here. You won't believe the chaos that erupted in those final minutes. The last words, the outburst, the arrests. It's the most explosive part yet, and it's coming next. Strapped to the gurney in the Huntsville death chamber, 70-year-old Billie Wayne Coble looked toward the witness rooms. The pentobarbital began flowing. Calmly, he delivered his final statement. "Yes, sir. That will be $5. I love you, I love you, I love you." He repeated the words of affection to his family, his son Gordon, grandson Dalton, and others, before adding, "Take care of yourselves. That will be $5. As his eyes closed and breathing slowed, chaos erupted on the other side of the glass. Gordon and Dalton exploded in rage and grief, pounding furiously on the window, yelling obscenities, kicking, and throwing punches. Guards rushed in, dragging them out. Both were arrested for disorderly conduct and resisting, though later released on bond with minor charges. At 6:24 p.m. on February 28, 2019, Coble was pronounced dead, the oldest person executed in Texas since the modern death penalty resumed in 1982. Afterward, the Vicha family found a strange form of closure, some even heading to a casino to celebrate the end of their long nightmare. Coble's family, meanwhile, was left shattered, the outburst a raw manifestation of decades of pain. The case left a complicated legacy. Appeals highlighted Vietnam War PTSD as a mitigating factor, rejected by courts, and exposed problematic testimony from prosecution psychiatrists later discredited for unreliable, future dangerousness. Predictions. Critics argued the execution rested on flawed evidence, fueling broader debates. Is the death penalty true justice, or state-sanctioned violence perpetuating cycles of trauma? Huntsville's chamber didn't stay cold long. The next execution followed just weeks later, part of Texas's relentless schedule. Does capital punishment ever bring real peace, or just more suffering? This story forces us to confront that question. Thank you for sticking with me through this intense 6-part series. If it chilled you, made you think, or hit hard, hit that like button. Share it with fellow true crime fans. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Doodle's team death penalty or against? And subscribe with notifications on so you never miss the next deep dive.